Hey, what's up guys? It's Bronson. Now in this video, we're going to be tattooing a hand, which is actually one of my favorite spots to tattoo. I really like the unique space and finding different ways to make images sit and flow well on the space. Now, as you know, tattooing hands also comes with its own challenges, especially getting a good heal on some tougher skin. So I'm definitely gonna share my advice on that. Now the image that we're gonna be tattooing is a $100 note, and we're gonna kind of have that burning on the hand as well. Now the note will be black and gray, and then the flames will be color. So there's another challenge as well, making these two tattoo styles flow into one and create one solid looking tattoo. Now obviously throughout this video, I'm gonna be sharing my thought process as well as some pro tips. Now I've also been getting absolutely flooded with tattoo related questions from tattoo machines. We've even made a few designs for some of you guys, like you guys have sent me things and I've kind of altered or given you guys advice. There's been a lot of critiquing tattoo work and just sharing my advice on anything in the industry really. Now all of that is great. That's exactly what I wanted this channel to create. A place for you guys to ask questions, to think artistically, and overall just improve your tattooing. Now, I think there's a way we can take this a step further. I'm gonna open up YouTube's kind of like membership side of it. So there will be a monthly fee, but I want to make really specific and in-depth videos on certain subjects within the tattoo industry. So there will be member exclusive videos. I also want to give you guys a platform to be able to talk to each other. So there'll be some sort of social media page there as well. And also some live Q&A and things like that. Now, if you're not wanting to get involved in that membership part of the channel, that's completely fine. And you don't have to worry about these videos getting devalued or me holding back any information and saving it for kind of the membership community. That's not gonna happen at all. Anything that I release on here is gonna be to the best of my ability. I'm always gonna try and give you guys the best content no matter what. I really do appreciate you guys taking the time to watch these videos and get involved. So I'm very grateful for that. I think this membership thing is just for people who are really wanting to level up their tattooing and get a more in-depth look to what's going on. Now, I'd also love it if you guys would take a photo or a screenshot of you guys watching this video and tag me in your Instagram stories. And one last thing before we get into the video, as you guys can see, it's changed up a little bit in here. You know, we're starting to paint the walls. Just like kind of my artistic ability and the quality that I provide, I really want to keep this artistic space that I'm in evolving in the same way, you know? So we're really early in this kind of little renovation stage. I'll give you guys a look. Yeah, we've kind of gone with like a gray for the walls. I think it's kind of fitting. The color and everything looks nice. And then what we're actually gonna do is have some kind of like slat wall. That's why we only painted like half the height of the wall. We're gonna have some slat walling with LEDs in there as well. So I think that's gonna look really nice. I love kind of like the mood it's created, eh? Everything's a little bit darker now. I think it all looks pretty nice. Yeah, especially when this wall is in. I think it's gonna look great. And that being said, you know, it's always great to put a little bit back into your artistic space. I definitely appreciate working in a really nice environment, and I'm sure the other boys too. So, yeah. Enough of all that. Let's finally get into this video. So here we have our first look at our stencil. Now it's quite an awkward shape, such a long rectangle that we're trying to fit on the hand, but I think with that fire there, it really gave us a way to kind of break up half the note and get this to work nicely, rather than if it was just the note, it's going to be one huge rectangle. So here I've cut some points in my stencil to make sure that that goes on well. And now I'm just marking some points to line this up when I place it. Now it is really important that you do cut lines into your stencils, especially on the hand or any surface that isn't flat. It's really going to allow your stencil to be pushed out evenly without distorting anything too much. And now I'm just having a last look, making sure that everything's lining up well from all angles, and then applying my stencil product. Now we can get our stencil pushed onto the hand. And I do try and always push out from the center. So I'll slowly get that center part pushed down and then slowly work my way pushing out towards the edges of the stencil. Now for my little trick of using the alcohol wipe. Like I've said in previous videos, it is a huge improvement to these inkjet styled stencils. It really makes your stencil a lot darker and hold a bit longer. So I will let that stencil just sit on the skin like this for a moment before peeling it off, just to ensure that it does really dry onto the skin, especially with hands and some of these trickier areas. Take your time placing a really good stencil. Even if it takes you a second attempt, it's really going to pay off throughout the day when you have a much better stencil to be working off. So I'm really happy with how the stencil's gone on. Now we're just peeling the last of it off before we get into drawing some of these final little touch-up areas onto our stencil, and just being a little bit considerate of the flow that's involved as well. Now you guys might have just seen that I'm using the Fold Pro today, so I'm sure a lot of you guys are quite excited about that. I know a few of you guys have the machine, and also I was using this machine for a while on the channel as well, so some of you guys might be here for that. But we can talk a little bit more about the machine, the volts and stroke that I have that set up on later on in the video. So now I'm just starting off with a 3-round liner to line out some of this major detail before I can get into any of my mag work. So you can see here, this is real-time footage. I'm really using a slow hand speed with this 3-round liner to really try and put in something nice and permanent that is going to heal really well. I think if there's anything that makes a hand tattoo heal great, is just really taking your time to get this ink in. You really can't try and cheat anything and speed things up too much without risking your healed result. And there are some techniques for really tough areas on the hand, especially on the edge of the hand where that's starting to roll onto the palm. So yeah, there's some special techniques that I use for areas like that, or perhaps on the knuckles where the skin is really rough and I need to change up my tattooing to really get a nice heal. And I'll make sure I share that information with you as those areas appear in the video. But for now, just like a lot of my tattoos, I'm in an early mapping stage. So I'm really just wanting to get as much of my stencil locked in as possible so that I can comfortably start using my mag without having to worry about the stencil rubbing off. I've decided to go with 2 mags for packing most of my black in this tattoo, and that is the 13 curved mag and a 9 curved mag. And it's great using smaller mags, especially for some of this tougher skin, because you have a lot less needle resistance. If I were to do something perhaps with a 23 round mag or even something over a 15 round mag, it's going to be a little bit harder for that needle to sit in the skin where it needs to really effectively saturate the skin. So with the 9 and the 13, there's a lot less needle resistance, allowing for a little bit quicker saturation and something that's like really at the right depth. You kind of want to punch it in a little bit harder on the hands and some of these tougher areas to really ensure for a nicer heal. It can make some of these tattoos in spots like this a little bit more painful to get, but it's your job as the artist to just ensure that your client gets the best heal and that you're going to do kind of whatever's necessary to make that happen for your client. And you can see I'm really just taking my time, making sure that this black is packed in well, because just like any tattoo, it's only going to be able to look as good as your fundamentals in tattooing are strong. So you need all your black tattooed in really nice and solid before you can start doing some nice techniques with your mids and light tones to work out from these areas. And here for the black, I'm really making sure that when my client's hand or fingers are all together, that there's not really a skin area seen. So I'm working quite far into like the edge. I kind of tattoo a little bit of like the web of his finger a little bit there, so that's a bit rough. I've had like 3 sessions on my fingers and kind of that like webbing area because it just kept dropping out, so I know how the bro feels there. Now we're getting into some of this really small, almost micro lettering. So I'm using a 3-round liner from WJX. It's a really affordable cartridge, but I find their liners are so sharp and precise. It's a really nice product to work with. Now here is one of the techniques that I was talking about explaining earlier in the tattoo. For making blacks still show up really nice and sharp and nice as a healed. You can see not only am I doing a normal way of lining, but also at points I'm almost dotting, being a little bit slower and deliberate with the needle to really try and almost inject that ink into the skin there in a really nice sharp and solid form. So some areas, once I've got that structure back through, I'll go through and do some dotting. Because the dot work in tattooing is so solid and permanent, you're really removing any kind of resistance from the needle and your hand. You're allowing that needle to really kind of like punch into the skin and deposit some ink. So in areas that are a little bit tricky, yeah, I'll kind of go through, line that out so I've got all my shapes there. And then for some areas that I need to be a nice solid black, I'll just go through and slowly dot that in. And it really is like kind of like a slow, almost like injecting kind of motion or technique. Not going for like fast coverage dots that are quite fast and peppery. This is more of a like, yeah, push the needle into the skin, just slowly push the needle and like leave it there for like a millisecond, you know? Now we're on to quite a fun part of the tattoo as well. For some reason, I really like tattooing like little signatures. And the best way to do that is to really think about what you're tattooing. You know, this is realism. We want this whole tattoo to look like a life-like image. So obviously to make a good signature, you kind of want to tattoo it the same way that you would really write that signature. So try not to stop start. I do like to work naturally from that kind of left to right and just start a flow. I'm not really focusing on the specifics of this note because it's a little bit too small to get caught up with things like that. And if you focus on the details too much, you can really over enhance some little flicks and make it not look so natural and flowy there. Now we're on to these more kind of punched in, typed in font. So I'm using a 7 brown shader, which is just naturally going to be like a fat marker putting in these numbers. So naturally the right needle for the job. And one thing that's so nice is it's so contrasting to the 3-round liner we were just using for our signature work below. Here we have something really bold and a real like typewriter type font. So yeah, such a nice contrast between the 2 lettering styles there. Now working up from that, we have this kind of washed in insignia with the 100 symbol, and you can see not only am I being aware of what I'm tattooing, but I'm really focusing on the area of the hand as well. So now we're in a spot where it's starting to roll, getting towards the palm of the hand a lot more. So I need to be a little bit harsher with my needle techniques in comparison to the portrait that's sitting center. Usually the center of the hand, the skin isn't too bad there. I'm using quite a small needle so that I can really punch this ink in. I'm really just taking my time, doing a few passes if necessary, but most importantly, I'm focused on hitting that right depth as fast as I can and just letting the needle hang out there to really get this well saturated. And with a little bit more care than normal as well, because here I'm not using a black value from my reference. This is more of a washed out light or mid-tone and not such a strong point in the image. So I'm making sure to stay true to my reference, putting that in at the correct value. So yeah, saturating with a lighter value evenly can just be a little bit trickier. So I'm in no rush to get past that. And now just to make what I'm tattooing really relevant, I want you guys to kind of look at your hand and you can see where I'm tattooing. I'm above and past the pinky finger. So you can see and feel there that that skin is really changing, especially where I'm tattooing right now. We're getting quite far rolled over to the edge of the hand, or what I keep referring to as the palm. Now I keep saying that because the palm has a lot tougher skin, and the best way for tattooing the palm of the hand is with really slow and precise and deliberate kind of dot work. It's not your fast rush dot work, it's your slow kind of pushing in and really injecting that ink. You're almost wanting to stay a split second away from a blowout is the correct technique. So just be careful when doing that. But you can see here, I'm not so much lining things in, I'm really just kind of wanting to dot things just nice and slowly and almost building up these forms from dots as well. You can kind of scratch things in a little bit and then go through and dot it in, but it's really the dots that you're gonna see when this is healed. Any not super harsh and heavy kind of like deep line work, it's just not gonna heal at all in the spot. So you can see a lot of this is just dotting in and kind of creating that level of saturation. You can see there, getting all of that mapped in. Now small hits like that, when kind of dotted in, they're really not going anywhere at all. And even tattoos like on the side of the finger or on the side of the hand there, kind of where I'm tattooing, that is how I'll tattoo like small lettering or the old like love heart on the inside of the finger there, is I will still do my line at whatever line weight they're wanting, but then I will go through and dot majority of that line as well. So just nice and slowly putting in that line, but then just go through and just help the tattoo out by just putting in those dots throughout the line. It's just really going to ensure that really nice solid heel. And for small tattoos on the fingers, like walk-in styled stuff, I always say to them, like, I'm not going to touch this up for free. So I don't want to be wasting anyone's time, my clients, my own, because like the smaller, cheaper work, I definitely don't want to have to be touching twice. So it's a technique that's really going to ensure that the tattoo is going to heal well on that first pass. And it's quite an interesting thing, like all tattooists obviously have different kind of weight behind the needle and techniques, and just naturally tattoo slightly different, all these like kind of like little micro alterations, and it makes artists like better or worse at different things. I've never really found I've been like had much of a strong point for tattooing fingers and like some of these smaller areas, so it was really quite important that I did find a way to kind of make that happen, especially earlier in my career where I had to tattoo walk-ins when they came in. Like now I don't really have the time for walk-ins anyway. I have tattooed one this year, but that's been the first one in ages. Like yeah, usually I'm quite busy, especially now with the YouTube channel, being a dad and all of that. So if I do have time free, or if someone cancels, or if I finish slightly earlier, I allocate that time somewhere else usually. Yeah. But there has been moments in my career as well where I've worked in the city, so that's obviously a lot more walk-in stuff, and you just end up, yeah, I guess working so much different. It's really interesting, but yeah, I'm really happy with, I guess, my work environment and how I've got everything balanced at the moment. Obviously, yeah, I guess life is quite fragile when you talk about the word balance, but yeah, everything's going good. And I'm now actually really trying to put in work to be like the best version of myself, eh? Doing all I can to just stop wasting time, you know? I want to effectively be the best tattooist I can be. So it was about thinking, okay, like everyone wants that, but what are you really doing to achieve that, you know? This is going to be some things that I'm definitely going to talk about in the kind of YouTube membership thing that we're going to start up. I do want it to be like a little bit of like an inspirational thing, ways to take action on really just like, I guess, taking control of your life, as well as like obviously heaps of tattoo things. But like I've been waking up early, training every morning, and then obviously working, and then I'm reading books and doing the YouTube stuff, and that's almost the daily routine. So there's like a lot in there. But it feels really fulfilling and rewarding to be kind of like exhausted as well when you're getting exhausted and working so hard for the right things. It no longer feels like tiring and draining. It actually kind of brings you a little bit of joy being so exhausted when you've pumped so much work, and you know that continuing these like daily or small habits over a long period of time is gonna lead you to, I guess, the life that you want, whether that's just your tattoo quality like going way up, or other aspects in your life and kind of getting more things on that kind of balance level that I was talking about. And one of the ways that I was like thinking on how to run this membership styled thing or part of YouTube is I really wanted to like offer a few of you guys, and some of you guys had kind of requested like a little bit of a mentorship. Now that's really hard over a large scale. Maybe it could be worked out privately. I guess if someone really wanted something like that, then you can get in touch with me, but it would be quite expensive. So a really good way, I think, to be able to offer this service is for this like membership side of the channel to be almost me directing like an imaginary figure and mentoring kind of like a ghost, So I'm just teaching one person who's like a made up individual all these kind of points that you guys are bringing across, because then I don't need to keep explaining the same things repetitively. This kind of ghost who you guys are all watching the videos that they aim towards. So that individual will be kind of asking questions on the facts that I'm kind of giving or the teaching. So I could say a point on shading and say, this is how I like to do that. And then this individual will challenge that point and say, oh, I don't think, or yeah, wouldn't this heal better or something, so that there is a real kind of learning environment happening. It's not just me sitting and telling you guys and you guys having to take it. I want there to be a little bit of like conversation and debate, because I think that's like the true form of learning. And I think that's going to be the only way. And until now, I didn't really know a way that I could do that. So that's what's really pushed me to open the membership side of things, is because I think I've found a really good format or structure of video. But obviously, it's going to be really in-depth and time-consuming for me to do that. So I guess that's going to be the trade-off, is obviously just that monthly fee for those that are keen to sign up to it. Now here in the video, you can see I'm kind of working over that knuckle area as well. So you'll see coming up, just pay attention to the techniques I'm using and this kind of dotted style as well. And while that's going on, we can talk a little bit more about the Fold Pro. So this is a machine that I've been using for I think over a year now, and every artist in my studio currently still uses this machine. Yeah, it's a great tattoo machine that's from Dragonhawk. And they sent me a few early on in this kind of YouTube adventure. I've actually stopped working for like a lot of brands, but yeah, it was nice early on to have someone reach out like that. So they also sent the Masked Racer, which is a great machine. It's the only other one that I've reviewed, and it just fits in your hand really well. The battery is located lower down, and it's really good for lining. I don't like it so much for shading, but one of the other boys does. It's only kind of, I'm not really the biggest fan of strokes above the 4mm, but the bro is. So yeah, it's a 4.2mm machine, I think. So he's using the Masked Racer at the moment, just experimenting with that. And I think he's really enjoying it. But for me, it was a little bit too harsh. Now the Fold Pro was a great alternative, the second machine that they sent. And it kind of got me stuck. They sent me another machine or two after that, but I didn't even use it. I'm not going to jump around too much, especially for tattooing clients, I'm just going to find something that's solid and stick with it. And the Fold Pro was that machine for me. So yeah, they sent me that machine and it was great. I was using it on the 3.9mm stroke. And the volts, I think I got up to about 7.8. But really found the machine worked for me great, yeah, around that 7.5 range. And I do have a lot of videos using this machine, and also the Fold Pro review video. So if you are wanting to grab this machine, maybe watch that video. It is a great machine, and most importantly, it is a really low budget but high quality machine. I just grabbed a second one of them because, oh, I actually told them just to send me a second one because I really like this machine and I wanted to have a backup. So it is also the machine where you can just do that. I think it's just a couple $100 for another machine, which is a great thing to do as a full-time tattooist, to have a backup machine. And that's something I've done with all of my favorite machines. So after years, if they ever need servicing, you can just send one away and pull out your second one. There's no interruption in your work, in your workflow or anything like that. So that's really the ideal alternative. And with a small budget, it really allows any level of artist to achieve that. You're not having to spend another $1,000. And quite often just having that backup machine will actually stop you from losing money and keeping your whole workflow more professional as well. So there's never any interruptions. And if you are wanting to purchase this machine or anything on Dragonhawk's official website, I do have my discount code, which I'm going to put in the description of the video as well. So that will get you 10% on anything on their website. That code is the real Bronson -10, all lowercase. But yeah, feel free to use that to bring down the price of an already very affordable tattoo machine. Now going back to the tattoo, you can see we've made a bit of progress. So we have mapped in all that lettering and numbers off to the right. And all the work is pretty much done on the fingers and below the note. So we're in a great position to now be tackling the portrait and just starting from that bottom right side, the clothes, and some early stages in the hair. So I have mapped in working from dark to light, getting in my darkest values, and then I'll go through and saturate with some of these mid and light tones like we're seeing here. And then if I need to, I can drop back with darker values as well, just making things as accurate as I can to the reference. Now here we have a bit of a trickier area because I have some smoke leading onto the face. So that lower part you can see is a harsh line, but then this area, I want that kind of fire, to be a little bit softer. So for that fire to have a soft edge at the top and a harsh edge at the bottom. Just going to give the tattoo a little bit more of a dynamic effect rather than just looking like the fire's like 2D hard edge slapped on the portrait the whole way across. It's not going to look very nice. Now you can see for the mouth here, I'm using a 7 curved mag to really softly put in the lips. Because especially on the early stage in the portrait, I don't want to put anything into permanent too soon. I want to kind of slowly work from things being a little bit blurrier and rendering things slowly and sculpting over time. So that's like the sharpness of the form and also the value. I want to build up to my final rendered result. I don't want to go in with a liner and do anything too permanent or too harsh. Now lips and stuff like this, you'll be surprised how soft the form actually sits on the portrait. And often, especially in real life, if you look at others, there's not a lot of that full black value there. So yeah, I guess just really kind of installing that realistic look and slowly rendering and building things up. So you can see because the portrait is quite small, I am using a 7 or 9 curved mag, where usually I'd be using a 13. Now I could still technically do this tattoo with a 13, but I think it's just going to lose a little bit of the render in some of the forms and how the values are sitting. It might make things just overly smooth and a little bit boring. Especially this is kind of like a elderly male portrait. So a lot of these harsh kind of textures in the values, it does actually look quite nice. And really doesn't skip any of the detail and small hits that are in the portrait, especially like this chin area where there is so much going on. We have this shadow side with so many little forms starting. It's like, yeah, like micro little forms everywhere, not just the shadow under the lips there, but yeah, there's a lot of interesting texture here. Now you can see I'm also using a 7 curved mag. This is a great tool for doing things like I was just talking about, not skipping or shying away from adding in the true detail and kind of values that are in your portraits. It's a really nice small needle allowing you to be really precise and still handle realism the same way using the mag techniques that you've already developed. Now, I do know a lot of great artists who use a lot of round shaders. Personally, I'd prefer to use them more on like a color portrait than these areas in a black and gray portrait, because they are a little bit harsher. But yeah, some artists are great with that. So that's another thing about tattooing, there's hardly a wrong or right here. If you are getting that nice healed result, that's really all that matters. The tools and the steps that you take to get there is definitely important and can make things a little bit more effective or efficient. But yeah, as long as you are getting that nice result, then you're definitely doing the right thing. And that's something that's quite funny. I think having like little processes definitely help. And like all you need to do is just stop and think about the tattoo that you did today and think of like a way or something that you could improve about it, whether you write that down or not. Well, just mid conversation here, but you can see we are starting the nose, and I'm using my 7 curved mag and a lighter value to really put that in. Like I've been talking about earlier in this video, just starting off nice and soft and almost blurry. I can always refine, making things sharper or darker. Here, the shadow side of the nose is very definite and permanent, so I have no hesitation to put in that true black value, and it's really nice to have a dark shadow to work off. But now back to what we were talking about. But I saw something about a really experienced artist lately, and he was kind of jumping all over the place throughout the tattoo and just like random, like kind of like getting bored of one area and then jumping up and then kind of jumping back down. But without having any actual process going on. And I found it quite funny because he takes ages to tattoo, and then like it's literally these processes or something like that that could just knock like 2.5 hours off of his tattoo session, because he's tattooing for like over 10 hours every time. So yeah, that's quite a funny thing. In saying that, like all respect to this guy, I do think his like maybe like famous portraits are better than mine, but he doesn't really do much work like outside of that stuff. So he's a great tattooist, and I do really like the fact that he's in no rush. He takes his time, and when the tattoo's done, it's done, and he just sits there and knocks it out. So yeah, that's really good. But I do think a little bit of efficiency could be achieved by having like a process on how you tackle areas, and how you kind of move your way through a tattoo. So now back to the piece, you can see that I'm using a 3-round liner, and I'm just being really specific with my darker values and putting them in really nice and accurately with a single pass, because that single pass is going to give me that sharper look. Now, if I need to, I can kind of brush off that and make that a little bit blurrier. But with the black around the eyes, I'm really trying to achieve a really nice heel. So just being a little bit slow and intentional when I'm putting in those values here, because the space is so small that if I kind of do make things a bit blurry and do multiple passes trying to achieve lines, it's just going to make them a bit fuzzy, really irritate the skin in the area. So I do need to be, yeah, just a little bit more precise and deliberate, trying to get things done a little bit faster than I might normally if this area was a bit bigger, and allowing for more detail. But the most important thing about these eyes right now is my negative space that I'm really not touching. And then next would be my black value, which is anchoring and setting the contrast between all of these values. Now we're going back into kind of an early mapping stage, working ahead of my stencil a little bit and on areas that I intend to finish after this. So once that information is locked in, I can drop back down to kind of that lower right side and yeah, start locking in a bit more information and really thinking about what this fire is doing and how it's interacting over the portrait. Not getting over focused on the portrait that I'm working on. I'm still always keeping in mind kind of how the two images are interacting with one another. And you can see I've been using my liner to kind of pass over, redefine and sharpen some of these forms like the nose that we just saw. And also with these eyes, I'm really relying on the 3-round liner being quite a sharp needle, saturating the skin pretty well, and also giving me a really delicate touch with the needle. I'm really able to control how I'm creating these forms of shadows a little bit faster than a mag might be able to get into some of these triangular like forms, especially at this size. So I'm really just taking my time to work up and create these nice gradients. And here I'm using more of a light or mid value, and I'm just working on that saturation that lies in the eye there. So I'm creating that bottom edge before I can go through and really put in that definite black that lies within that pupil there. And then starting to kind of render out some more of these shadows from the form. But really at all times I'm working on protecting that negative space that is the eyelid and those surrounding areas. It really is oversaturating into your negative space that really changes your shapes of forms. And with portraits like this, it can really ruin the identity of who is sitting on this $100 note. Now you can see I'm using my 3-round liner to drop back down into this portrait a little bit and find the sharpness that I need out of these forms. So just going through with minor touches and refining some of these forms a little bit more. And this 3-round liner is a great tool when working at portraits of this size especially. It really is these small and fragile hits of that correct value in these small areas that is just really going to bring your portrait to life and confirm that light source creating all of these values in the portrait. So you really do need this accurate look reoccurring all through your portrait on how these shadows are forming and the harshness of these shadows. Having that core shadow line the same value is a great way to kind of make sure that this happens. And if you're unsure on what a core shadow is, do take the time to just quickly Google that as well. I'm sure you'll be met probably with an image of those balls that are correctly shaded, where you have that one light source and then you've got kind of your core shadow, the terminator line where that crosses into your shadow side, and then you can see the reflective shadow also coming up from that. So having a little bit of a visual understanding on what should be achieved will really help you when working in some areas where maybe your reference is a little bit unclear. It allows you to kind of take that artistic initiative to really do what should be right in your reference and create a really good realistic result. Now that all the information is locked in on this portrait, I've done the basics for all of my forms, the lip, the nose, the eyes, all of that is basically locked in and the values are pretty correct. Now I'm able to use some of these lighter values and more saturating values that really complete the portrait to start to complete these forms and get to like a closer level of being fully saturated, leaving just the negative space. So with all that form locked in, I'm really able to be quite loose now, really just focusing on saturating all of this blank space that's left. And this has become one of my favorite ways to tackle these portraits, really focusing on all of my forms first, these major forms, and then getting to that slightly more refined and further into like my lighter values. I can then come through at the end and have a lot of fun with these lighter values and the mag size that I'm more used to, like this 9, 13s and stuff like that. And it really has become one of my favorite parts of tattooing portraits, because just like adding the white is finalizing and really bringing to life your portraits, this is like a step before that, but it does so much and really completes the look of your portrait. Before a lot of this value was in, it was just looking like an average piece. But then as you do apply these light values and fully get to that level of saturation that's correct in your reference, it just really brings your reference to light, and it makes you think that you hardly even need white. Like a lot of the time I don't use much white in my portrait work now, maybe just a little hit in the eyes, but some pieces don't even need it. Just with this value and saturation, I find sometimes that negative space left in the skin, as long as you are really trying to protect that at all times and not oversaturate into that, taking care in that stage can just lead you to a really nice looking portrait without the use of white. But obviously when you hit that white in, if you do choose to use it, it's just going to look that much more impressive because your piece is well saturated. So there's not a lot of that value left to be put in there, making the white or the negative space a really powerful part of the tattoo. Now, it was quite time consuming working at this size as well. I often find that tattoos take just as long as if they're this size or really like 5 times bigger, because now I'm really having to drop the size of my tools, so using smaller needle configurations like the 3 round liner and the 7 curved mag, whereas usually I'll be using the 13 round mag and a 7 round liner. So I'm still spending the same amount of time, but now I'm having to drop down and be so fiddly and precise. It's a little bit of a slower way of tattooing, I think. But I am really happy with the sizes that we went for. I think it's going to lead for the best result, showing enough of that note. And really, I wasn't happy doing this piece any smaller. Although this is a piece of money, so we wanted to include enough of that, there's still a portrait on the hand, so you have to remember that and prioritize it as what is a size of an acceptable portrait that you're willing to do, and something that's going to sit well on the hand. So it would have been okay, maybe a touch smaller, but it's always best to, just go a little bit bigger if you can. And we decided on this size that's including enough of everything that myself and the client were happy and thought was important in the tattoo. Obviously being the portrait, enough of the fire and the money. So the ratio of everything is, something that all of us were happy with. Now you can see, just like lower down in the tattoo, the fire has a harsh edge on the bottom, and then is something a lot softer, almost transparent, allowing that image to come through on the top half. So since that is a much softer edge at the top, I'm really making sure to use a little bit more mag work on that top edge of the fire there, just above the portrait. And now that that's all mapped in there, coming back down into my portrait, to continue saturating the forehead area and also dropping back down to do any more rendering that's needed on these lower forms. Now this step that I'm doing next is something that I see a lot of people do in their portraits. Is on the shadow side of the portrait, we often have that core shadow line just sitting in from where the hair and the edge of the face is. So there's almost like a negative space sitting down, framing the face like you can see here. Now a lot of people forget to come back and saturate that to the correct value, because it does look quite cool when it is a negative space. But I do really think that that's not a realistic approach to take when tattooing your portraits. So please do drop back through and saturate that to the correct value of your reference. It is going to make for a much more realistic result, although you might be looking at it and thinking that you like that effect. I guess there's nothing too wrong with it, as it is a more contrasted effect, but you need to understand that that's what you're doing. So if you are leaving that as a negative space, then you need to bump up that contrast through the rest of your portrait as well. If you are wanting to make the most realistic approach to your work, then do start saturating that area to the correct value. Here I'm just enhancing some of the creases that actually lie on the money, so the portrait isn't exactly flat. There's some of these creases on the eye of the portrait and around that kind of area. So just putting in that information and leaving that negative space where I might be able to come back and drop some white onto later if I want to enhance that effect a bit more. And now a lot of what I'm doing is just finding a balance in the level of saturation and these values that are lying in the portrait. So I am moving around the portrait a little bit randomly, as I'm kind of really trying to complete the lower section in my furthest level of rendering and slowly working my way up. Really focusing on the edges, on how sharp or soft something is, and what those shadows are really doing. And also I'm considering what this fire is doing at all times. Like I said earlier, not getting too locked into my portrait and ruining that next aspect, which is actually really powerful in this image. And whenever I feel necessary, taking the time to step further up into my portrait to complete areas of my stencil that I think are becoming a bit of a risk of rubbing away, or I'm wanting to just complete a little bit more of a border or a harsher edge to start working down towards, because my portrait isn't going to look complete until I have a little bit more edge capping some of these areas off, giving me a really good fundamental shadow to be pulling out and working from. Now, just like in my last few videos, I think it's really important for you guys to be able to hear the tattoo machine running to maybe give some people a bit more of an understanding of what's really going on. So for the next few minutes, I'll just let the machine and the natural audio kind of play out. And I hope that there's something in there that you guys can learn from that on how the machine's hitting the skin and my hand speed to what's really going on. I think some of these audio cues are a little bit easier to really hear what's going on and how the cartridge is reacting to hitting the skin. So we'll get into that now. Cool, so I hope that you guys were able to get something from that. You can see with that large saturating pass that now the portrait is looking really solid and at a pretty final stage as well. So there I was really focusing on using my largest mag to wash over a lot of the tattoo with my final saturating value to really complete and hit some of these pockets that were left. And also it's really great for blending. It's almost like kind of like a blending brush in painting. You're creating a really relevant value that's lying over all of the portrait, just making it look like one really well tattooed piece. Now, I don't lazily pass over all of these values that or forms that I've laid in, kind of like double passing areas, but I do blend out with it and I do saturate blank space. I often refer to the term being lazy with a value or kind of like hand speed, but I'm still actually really considerate on the angle that my mag is on. So often things might look really lazy, especially if I say that, but it's kind of lazy for me in a term of just you can be a little bit more relaxed with the value, but you still need to have a lot of mag control, not like disregarding, overworking areas, or pushing into negative space or something like that. I do have, I think, a lot of control with my mag on how I use it on its side and turning the cartridge at all times. Now we're getting into the color part of this tattoo. You can see I completed that top left section of the note because a lot of that was quite repetitive to areas that we had already gone over. So I think the tattoo, the black and gray part, is looking great so far, and I really feel like all the hard aspects of this tattoo is complete. A lot of this fire is just a really loose form and a lot of gradients kind of going from dark to light, and there's basically just 3 colors here, so it's really easy to work with. Just like black and gray, I am working from dark to light. And with color, especially your early tones or values that you're placing, I do think that it's really important to start with a really high chroma, a really deep, nice color, and really try and saturate that well, because this is going to be the foundation for the color to start building off. And quite often, if you start in kind of a mid-range value or light, you don't have a lot of room to move and keep getting lighter. And then with color, the lighter you get, the less chroma or the less intense that color then holds. So it is nice to start not only in dark value, but also really deep in chroma. So starting off with a really rich color and then working out into not just your lighter values, but also your lighter variations of the color. And quite often you'll find when you're tattooing color, things might wash out and start to look a little bit lighter. And that's because you're not using any kind of black values. So colors definitely aren't getting darker once you're working from dark to light. These lighter values are washing into and over the values that you've already placed, or colors. So naturally, if you hit a color that's already laid down in the skin with a color that is lighter in value than what you've got, it is naturally going to become a little bit lighter and more washed out. Color is a little bit more sensitive to that. You can really change the chroma that's there as well. When you start adding white, you really are just washing down that level of chroma. So do try and stay away from whites when mixing. And it's a really nice natural step. You can see that I started with my darkest value, and I don't even really need to wash out my cartridge then. I can stay from that dark, deep kind of red that I had, and then just hit it into the orange and keep working down like that. Then the orange will be dipped into the yellow. So all of these steps, I don't really need to rinse out my cartridge hard out throughout any of that. And it's also nice to kind of keep all that mixing in the cartridge as you're going, and maybe dip back up into your red to really make that orange a little bit more powerful. And I do really find that a lot of these pen styled machines, they do really love color, as naturally I think they have a little bit more of an aggressive hit, especially with a lot of them being styled around that 4.2mm stroke or 4mm, which is actually bringing its way into realism quite a bit, and a lot of the artists going that way. Traditionally, I do like to just stick around that 3.5mm stroke. It's just something that I'm used to and I've spent years doing. Maybe in a year or two I'll shift up there, but right now I'm pretty comfortable and happy just at that 3.5mm stroke. And you can see, because I've done all the hard work with my black and gray styled portion of this tattoo, I really only need to use my larger mags, which is my 13 curved mag and my 23 curved mag, because I'm just focusing on saturating this area in. I'm not really trying to rush that either and get that in with the one true value that's showing. I do still want to create a nice gradient, so it's still just working in my values and leaving a little bit of room for another color to wash through there. So I don't want to fully pack in the skin, not leaving any more room for any more kind of like trauma to happen in the skin without being scarred or overworked or anything like that. So yeah, I am keeping that in mind. And you can see here that I'm also passing a little bit of that orange hue to appear into the black and gray portion of the tattoo. Because with the fire and such a vibrant color, it just really looked far too separate to only be sitting where the flames were in the stencil. I think it's a nice little realistic touch to have a little bit of that orange hue kind of fading in a gradient over some of the portrait, especially in that top part where we did leave a lot of that soft edge, so the fire was almost a little bit closer to that portion. And I think it's small little touches like this that you add into your tattoos that really sell the story of the reference and the effects that you're trying to put through that. In this case, it's the fire. And this is a pretty intense day for my client, so I'm real grateful for my client for smashing through this tattoo, just really sitting there solid as, like, he hasn't moved or complained all day. I think before applying the color, we did put on a little bit of Bactine just to really take the edge or the sharpness out of the cartridge a little bit, make that slightly easier. And I think I actually top up that Bactine soon, so it's a really great product to have. It doesn't completely numb the area. It can at times for a little bit, but it is more about taking that edge off. So here you'll see there's a little bit more Bactine on the skin, and I just leave that there to soak while I finish up this area. I'm not too fussed about wiping it off, so I'll just spray that on, leave it for 2 minutes, and then just get back into tattooing. And when I'm approaching that area, then I can wipe that off the skin a bit more to not be pushing any products into the skin. But I definitely rate Bactine as a much better alternative than numbing creams or anything like that, where you do change the texture of the skin and how that tattoo is going to heal quite a bit. The Bactine is a lot less traumatizing to the tattoo in the whole process, but it really does help just take that edge off for your client, and it's really good at the end of the day because it only works on broken skin. So I guess that's a trade-off. You need to have already tattooed a little bit for it to even do anything. And now there's still a little bit left up in the kind of top left corner of this hand, but we're just going to quickly saturate through a little bit of that off camera, and now we can have a look at our finished result. Thank you guys for making it to the end of the video. I really hope that there was some information there that you guys can apply into your own tattooing. And keep an eye out for this little membership thing starting up shortly. It should just be a few weeks away while I finish creating some content. In the meantime, just make sure that you like the video, that you're subscribed to the channel, and get involved in the comments down below. I'll see you guys in the next video.